Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we'll be focusing on the presidential activities of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, which took place on Saturday and on Sunday. As on Saturday, the Afrexim Bank meetings were concluded on Saturday in the presence or the statements made by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi regarding the development of the infrastructure, not just in Egypt, but in Africa and for the African continent as a whole in different fields like infrastructure, the green economy, housing, all the new fields that will be discussed as well in Sharm el-Sheikh in the month of November regarding the climate change in the COP27 summit that will be held here in Egypt for the first time, and the first time for it to be held in the Middle East and Africa and in the Arab world as well. And we will be discussing the future of the economy, the investment and the financial markets in Egypt and in Africa with Mr. Osama Murad, the financial and the investment expert. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, and good evening to you and the viewers.
Anytime. First of all, we'll be starting with the top story for today, which came from the presidential activities of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, but in Sharm el-Sheikh, as President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi held on Sunday a trilateral meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh with King Abdullah II of Jordan and King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa of Bahrain. President al-Sisi said that Egypt looks forward to bolstering the constructive cooperation among the three countries as it fulfills the interests of their peoples and reinforces the joint Arab action in light of the enormous challenges ensued from the several regional and the international developments, as the presidential statement read. For their side, the kings of Bahrain and Jordan expressed eagerness for augmenting the collaboration with Egypt to the level of the strategic partnership. That is because such a step would optimize benefiting from the chances and the capabilities lying in the joint relations, preserving the regional stability and security, and reinstating balance in the region. The talks mainly covered the cooperation, coordination in dealing with the issues of mutual concern, developments on the regional and the international levels, and the challenges facing the region. Mr. Osama, how do you see such an important meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the King of Jordan, and the King of Bahrain?
It is strategically very important. We have strong ties with both countries as well as many other Arab countries. President Sisi has been very active on the international level since the start of the second phase of the economic crisis, which was sparked by the Ukrainian conflict. So very active economic and investment talks with Saudi Arabia, with the United Arab Emirates, with Qatar, both showing strong commitment and support for cooperation. Then moved up to the level of trilateral also with Jordan and the United Arab Emirates for joint investment projects. And now a strategic level partnership with Bahrain and Jordan. Jordan specifically has always been a very, very close and dear partner. Through proximity is very important. International alliance on any regional conflict, specifically the Israeli-Palestinian issue. A very well-rounded Jordanian leadership under the king and the former king, his late father, and big imports from Egypt, but also many Egyptian expatriates working and living in Jordan. So it is strategic by nature, and it should be formalized in that level. Bahrain shares the same, while a little bit further away. But the political relations with Bahrain have always been strong, even at the historical times. Many people were not born during Camp David, but Bahrain had a more moderate approach than the rest of the Arab countries. The king of Bahrain is a friend of Egypt. He's an owner of a house in Sharm el-Sheikh. We named a street after him. The main street in Sharm el-Sheikh is named after him. He had, with the previous Egyptian leadership, President Hosni Mubarak, extremely good ties. He continued the good ties with the military leadership, and even at the time of the Muslim Brotherhood, his relation is very strategic and very focused. His relation is with Egypt. It's not with names. Yes. Always strong partnership and with those countries. And at the time of economic crisis, which is now a global economic crisis, it is extremely important to have alliance and build alliances on the economic front, on the investment front, on the cooperation front, on the workers front and having Egyptian workers abroad, and of course on the military front, because we are in a conflict area, and the risk has not been eliminated that this war could have its sparks and expand either regionally in Europe or across the world. So we are in a pretty uncertain time, economically, military, and it's time for friends and long-term partners to move up to a strategic level. So we can only praise and hail that step and decision.
Yes, Mr. Osama, of course, quite recently we celebrated 8 years for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi since taking office. How would you assess the political relations between Africa, which is the main topic for today, the economic relations between Egypt and Africa, Egypt and the Middle East, Egypt and the Arab world, even Egypt and neighbors like Greece, Cyprus in the Mediterranean? How do you see the political agenda of President al-Sisi, the political leadership, especially with Foreign Minister Osama Shukri?
Because the Egyptian diplomacy and previous leaders had always successes. But maybe what differs President Sisi's approach is he's not taking sides. And that's very, very clear. And this enabled him to be friends with all the countries, have extremely good relations with all the countries, establish and reinforce and cement the Egyptian strong foothold in the region,
yes,
act as the spokesperson or the name to be talked to if you're talking to the Arab world, to Africa, and even now to the Eastern Mediterranean. It's all we always have a preference to refer everything to the economic situation.
Yes.
Egypt is and has been for the last 10-20 years always one of the 3 largest economies in Africa, was one of the fastest growth rates, and it's a gateway to Africa. Especially with many logistics projects, starting from the Suez Canal, going from the Trans-African highway, which supposedly was to be finished. Still 2-3 parts in Central Africa are to be finished, which goes from Alexandria to South Africa. And so it's a very important gateway to Africa. But more important, the president has never forgot in his international activities, be that at the UN, be that with the United States, be that with Russia, be that with the European Union,
yes,
or with China, always to speak not only on behalf of Egypt, but also on behalf of Africa, has always lent a hand and said, we're there for Africa if Africa needs anything.
Yes.
We just hope that the issue of the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam gets solved, because that might be the only bad taste in our African relations. But we're sure we can overcome that. You mentioned Cyprus and Greece.
Yes.
A few people understood the importance. But with time and with the latest visit of the EU head president now, it becomes more clearer. Egypt is part of a big part of the Eastern Mediterranean basin, which contains a lot of gas. And that basin could be the savior for the world energy crisis and gas and economic crisis. Egypt was on the front run with Israel together on exploration, on protecting the Eastern basin, and on joint talks always with Greece and Cyprus, which also have a share in that basin. Before the Ukraine crisis, always talks about the economic benefits, who will finance, what we will do, so that we create a means to export the gas or electricity to Europe. So it always a cost-benefit analysis. With the Ukrainian prices and with the Russian cutoff in the air, it's not about price, it's about survivor. So that's why the European Union came to Egypt and said, you know what, we're gonna help you explore further, expand and upgrade the LNG facilities which are existing. If there is possibility for growth, we might grow them, and we will work on expanding the undersea pipeline, maybe also electricity cables, so that we can produce the electricity to Egypt and export to Europe. So for Europe, specifically, through the strong cooperation with Cyprus and Greece, Egypt might be the savior, maybe this winter, maybe the after, but it has now increased its strategic importance as a partner to Europe. And Europe has always been our first economic and investment trade partner. Yes.
On the other hand, the final question regarding this topic before delving to the main topic for tonight and the Egyptian-African relations. Yes. As an expert in finance and investment, this meeting for today between the President of Egypt, the King of Jordan, the King of Bahrain, in terms of investment, how can this be good for Egypt?
It is great for Egypt because there is always joint investment from the Jordanian and Egyptian side, cross-border investments. We have many Jordanian companies expanding and operating in Egypt and vice versa. It's a natural expansion for both countries. Bahrain is an investment gateway globally, has been one of the biggest money centers in the world for a long time, maybe not rich by itself, but it's a great intermediary with many of the international and regional banks having their headquarters or regional headquarters in Bahrain. So it's very important to have the talks with both of them. But I think that the talks about moving the relations to the strategic level contain more than just economy. They could contain food security. Jordan is one of the poorest countries in the world for water, and thus is viable to the risks of food security because of the low production of vegetables and fruits, which are water containers, in fact. So Jordan needs to secure its food security. Jordan is a strategic partner also in the Eastern Mediterranean basin, and Egypt could be the hub whereby Jordan could also export through the pipeline which is already existing to Europe its gas if they have abundance. For Bahrain, Bahrain is a small kingdom, the young or small brother of the Gulf states, being the smallest in size and also in population and in wealth. So needs to secure relations, needs to secure food, needs to secure investment opportunities, needs to stand by Egypt in the current crisis, whereby maybe the Gulf is the only area which benefit from the current prices, because the economy is 80–90% built on oil and petroleum and gas exports. So this concentration was a benefit this time due to the record high prices of those commodities in the market. Nevertheless, if we refer back to the internal policies of President Sisi, whereby he has strategically increased commodity production, especially wheat in the region, and whereby nobody knows how long this crisis will be and what the next crisis will be, because we've been now in the last 15 years through back-to-back crisis, I call it. 2008 we had the global economic crisis.
Yes.
2011 we had the Arab Spring, which had a 3-4 year crisis time, and then the after effect of that. We did not wake up from the crisis and wake to normality, jump into the coronavirus, COVID-19. While COVID-19 was there, we have the Ukrainian-Russian crisis, or let's call it the battle for the superpower of the world, or rebalancing global powers. Russia is there, United States is there, China is there. So it is a time where you need friends and strategic partners.
Yes, a new global order, according to the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be heading to the first report of the daily debate for tonight. And as I mentioned, the main topic for the daily debate would be the Egyptian-African relations, as we did see the statements of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Saturday on the sidelines of the AfricSim bank meetings, the African Export-Import Bank meetings, where His Excellency stated that Egypt will be cooperating and coordinating with Africa in different fields like the green economy and like infrastructure, housing and medicine as well. We'll be having more details in the upcoming report.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said that Egypt spent between $400 billion and $500 billion in the past 7 years to build adequate infrastructure that is key for development. He noted that yet what have been implemented was on an area from 10 to 12% of the overall 1 million square kilometers of Egypt. President al-Sisi's remarks came during a session at the 2022 African Export-Import Bank's AfricSim Bank, the 29th annual meetings that wrapped up its sessions on Saturday. The meetings were held under the theme Realizing the African Continental Free Trade Area AFCFTA potential in the post-COVID-19 era, leveraging the power of the youth. The president wondered if the infrastructure in the African continent is qualified to meet the aspirations and hopes of its peoples. He asked during a session titled Africa is Hedging Against Foreign Shocks and Domestic Challenges if banks in major countries were ready to offer loans to Africa to upgrade its infrastructure to carry out development plans. The president hinted that there are African countries with huge agricultural potential but are lacking the infrastructure that enables them to export. President al-Sisi added that the lack of security and stability was the second obstacle hindering African development. During the event, the governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, Tariq Amer, said that the consecutive international developments such as COVID-19 and global inflation have burdened African economies, which have already been suffering from several challenges. Amer stated that policymakers have to take drastic measures to curb rising inflation rates and address points of weakness at the financial level. He said that financial institutions became aware of their social responsibility in view of the consecutive challenges, noting that this has led to adopting policies and mechanisms leading to creating jobs and curbing inflation. Organized by AfricSim Bank and the CBE, this edition of the annual meetings hosted more than 3,000 participants from African central banks, banking officials, African officials, and international organizations.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate. Mr. Osama Murad, I will be starting with the main headline that we had seen in the past report. President Al-Sisi said that we have spent between 400 and 500 billion dollars in the past 7 years on infrastructure and on the building of new roads, building of new access, building of and the construction of new cities. How do you see this big of a number?
It is huge and it is unprecedented. We did not see that in modern history in Egypt before. And it is noticeable to the witness by eye if you walk on the streets of Egypt anywhere. And
Yes.
this time it's Egypt, not traditionally we had this upgrade of infrastructure in Cairo and the main cities.
Yes.
Now it's all over Egypt. Highways are being built, streets are being widened, public transportation is being extended. Electricity, where in 2011 we had a shortage of electricity, we have now an abundance of electricity which we will export to Europe
Yes.
and other countries. In the petroleum sector, we moved from shortage also, which was a burden on our foreign currency and was a burden on the subsidies, to a surplus of local gas and petroleum, and our ability to export through the LNG facilities as mentioned before.
Yes.
And it is also witnessed by all the international reports and the rankings of Egypt's infrastructure capabilities, which moved up 50 to 60 ranks compared to other countries in the world, because you always have to look at the relative picture in the world, because we could be upgrading and the West is upgrading too, so we're not doing much better. But the current states, and we're forgetting the ports, airports, seaports, and even the land ports. So you have to praise the efforts which have been done in all those. And then there is huge spending also on expanding into new cities. Some people are doubtful about when will the benefits of those new cities be seen. But you have to see that all in a global context. It all falls together. If you build those highways, you might benefit also that you have remote cities, and those remote cities will be served better and grow better with better highways, with upgrading the railway, establishing the super speed train, and the monorail. So you have on all fronts fantastic activity and spending,
Yes.
which I think compared to other African countries is not there. And also not present in many even Arab countries.
Yes.
We're sitting with even friends from one of the very rich Arab countries, and they said, what you're doing here is fantastic, because when we had a housing problem, the government promised to build 10,000 houses, of course, scale to scale. In Egypt, we built 150,000.
Yes.
It took them 7 years. We built them, and people are living in 18 months. So it is a great effort, which could be of benefit of Africa. And the president here, beside the headline, mentioned something very important. It might be the time for African international cooperation. It might be more beneficial for Egypt to grow its agriculture in other African countries, beneficial from a water point or from a benefit point. But you have to establish the infrastructure. The roads have to be there, the ports have to be there, and the roads have to be there. So, and since he came into power, he has always tried to underline the importance of Africa for a very long time. He invites African leaders continuously be that as his anniversaries, be that at military parades, be that at new military equipment, at the new administrative capital. So it is a continuous way. It is not that he's speaking or having the topic Africa because the Afrexim Bank and African leaders are here, but it is continuously on his top priority agenda.
On the other hand, speaking of the new cities, building a new capital, having like the new Alamein city, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli was there checking out the workflow on Saturday at the new Alamein city. One of them because we have the footage of expanding the road between Alexandria and Marsa Matruh, for example, from the kilometers 101 to 156 to be expanded to be 7 lanes. We have those.
I went to see that.
Yes, well, we have those examples, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
They are being done not just in 7 or 6 years, in a year or less.
Yes.
How do you see the importance of expanding what we have, having a better product of what we are having already, and building new cities, building a new capital, building new roads leading to those new cities and capitals?
Well, if you go through history, Germany was built and developed by the expansion of the famous Autobahn. The United States was developed and urbanized by the railway. So a lot of countries, development was empowered and triggered and supported by the expansion of transportation or the upgrade of transportation, which is a natural development. And they go together. You could not have built those cities without the roads. And those roads would not be economical if they don't serve a number of citizens.
Yes.
I mean, those roads, which are in some areas 10 lanes each way, with overpasses and bridges and turns according to international standards. If those cities don't get inhabited, they become uneconomical. Because if they are just there for the summer, it's uneconomical. But very obvious that there are plans to have people moving, losing the density in the crowded cities, not only in Cairo, because we also have many crowded cities in the Delta, and they naturally expanded historically to Alexandria. Alexandria itself became crowded, so it is a natural expansion and extension for that. But they couldn't move before that because there was no infrastructure, there was no electricity, there was no gas, there were no roads, no access. No government to finish the paper and bureaucracy. Now, Al Alamein, with its setup, with having a mini parliament, a mini cabinet, a mini presidential palace, seems like will be the summer capital of Egypt.
Yes. On the other hand, we have like Mustaqbal Masr, the future of Egypt, which is about all land reclamation of 1 million faddans in the country. How do you see such an important project for the future of the country in the field of infrastructure, in the field of industry, and of course in agriculture?
It is extremely important regardless of the price, because it addresses the issue of food security, which is the hot topic in the world now, which we have seen in the Ukrainian crisis.
Yes.
Egypt needs to move closer and closer to self-sufficiency on food in general or commodities specifically, or at least ensure the different sources. And that's when we go back to the beginning of our episode, when you asked about the international relation, the president has been able to juggle the international relations, whereby we still maintain good relations with Russia and with Ukraine. One of the very few countries which is able to do both and still maintain healthy, good relations with the West, the United States, and Europe. Why? Because we're taking an approach of we don't interfere, we're friends with everybody,
neutrality.
Not our issue. Our issue is local and to help and improve the quality of life of Egyptians and secure water and food. That's basic rights which are extremely important. And definitely the 1 million faddan is one of the biggest agricultural projects.
Yes.
We are still short of our dream whereby we need to move maybe 10 million, but one is a start. I mean, Chinese proverb said the road of 1,000 miles starts with a step. We haven't done a step, we have done 10 or 100 steps in the right direction. And once the private sector is empowered and gets back to dominate the economic scene, that infrastructure spending, agricultural spending, logistics enablement will grow exponentially. The government is doing a fantastic job, but we're still growing what we call mathematically. We grow exponentially when we empower the rest of the economic community to be a major player on that scene.
You've mentioned several times that it is very important to be moving people outside of Cairo, outside of Alexandria, outside of the crowded places in the country, because we need to be having a better use of the places that we have and the deserts that we have. In terms of the financial position of the people leaving Cairo or leaving Alexandria, or they are based in the south of Egypt, do you think that the financial position of those citizens will be better in the future with those projects? They wouldn't be needing to move anywhere else to Cairo as millions of people did in the 1980s and 90s?
It's development questions, and many countries always were taking and asking and questioning the approach. Should you, and let's not use the word moving, also I use it, let's say luring or attracting. Because when you move people by force or by penalizing them, it doesn't work all the time. But you need to have attractive hotspots so that people move. We've seen in developments globally that sometimes you attract the poor people by having jobs and a better life than they have, which is the example for many people of Upper Egypt which are moving upward.
Yes.
But sometimes you want to have an attractive place for the wealthier. When the wealthier move, they move with the whole ecosystem because they need for their life a middle class and a lower economic class. They need better services. The quality of life moves up because they already strive and know the better standard. And I think that's the approach of the expansion of the North Coast. I don't want to only mention New Alamein because there is New Alamein, there is Hikma, there is Marsa Matruh, there is New Hammam, there is the biggest military base which contains a lot of the 1 million faddan agriculture, Mohammed Naguib. There is the nuclear plant. I don't know if it will happen. I had my doubts all the time, but let us see there if it's still a necessity. But this is an approach of moving the middle class or the upper middle class, establishing private universities in Alamein. 3 are already functional, they have students. So if you have students which can afford private universities, their parents can afford private university, they can afford the rent, then they will need supermarkets, they will need dry cleaning, they will need plumbers, the whole infrastructure is there and moves with them. So with every wealthier person, you automatically bring with them 10 to 15 people which already have jobs or work to be done. So you're not moving people, which was the old factor of Upper Egypt or Delta people moving to Cairo and searching for jobs. No, the gap is already there and you need to fill it. So
they don't need to go anywhere else.
They don't need to go anywhere else. And if you go now, the best thing is to go and see by yourself. If you go to the North Coast in winter now, it is inhabited. It was not like it was before that you are going and then you're in no man's land in the middle of the desert. You could survive and live. Maybe a few hospitals need to be done on an international level, but I think there is one to be opened soon in Alamein. That might be the only issue. But already last summer, many senior citizens and many people who can afford and work from home were discussing, why don't we live on the north coast of Egypt? The weather is better, environment is better, and so actually I know several people which have been, since the coronavirus, living in the north coast, coming to Cairo only if they need, but their main residence is now on the shores.
There's also a change of mindset.
Of course. I mean, one good thing is that the coronavirus did that the physical presence or location is not anymore important to finish your work. And even if you look at the government, when we mentioned you need to do something, the government is doing a fantastic effort in the e-government space, where you can do most of your service, and soon, hopefully, all your services, without needing to go physically there. Once we have the project of the digital ID finished, you will actually have an ID on the internet digitally, which proves your identity, so you can finish everything. But now it's a hybrid system, or it's a mix, but still you can achieve a lot of things on the internet without the need to go physically.
Yes, Mr. Osama will be turning to the second report of the daily debate for tonight and focusing on, as I mentioned in the beginning, the Egyptian-African relations in different fields like the green economy, the infrastructure, housing, building new cities, building and constructing new roads and bridges. And we will be taking a quick break with this report, and we'll be returning once again to you, so stay tuned on the daily debate.
Egypt is currently seeking to increase its exports to international markets, and with a special scope on Africa's markets. The state aims to deepen trade exchange with the countries of the continent, especially the COMESA countries. Ministries and concerned authorities to monitor the export movement on an ongoing basis and measure the effectiveness of the new program to support exports. Egypt is taking several steps to bolster its exports in Africa's markets. That includes a plan and a clear vision to enter the African markets with local Egyptian products and commodities. The vision comes to support the Egyptian presence in the continent, especially with the launch of Egyptian projects in more than one country. Egypt has launched its first local commercial chain in Africa. The commercial chain launched by the Egyptian private sector with great support from the government to facilitate the exit of goods from Egypt and harnessing the Egyptian commercial offices in Africa. The investments of the Egyptian commercial chain reach 500 million Egyptian pounds as a first stage. By the end of 2025, Egypt will have 22 branches of its commercial chain in 6 African countries. Egypt opens 4 branches of its commercial chain in Zambia and a branch in the Democratic Republic of Congo for the first time. Egyptian products will have real spaces on the shelves of commercial chains in Africa.
Welcome back. You're still watching the daily debate. Mr. Osama Murad, as you mentioned throughout the program, that the relationship between Egypt and Africa is continuous. So one of them is the opportunity of investing in Africa by the Egyptian businessmen. How did you see this step growing in the past 7 or 8 years under the tenure of President Sisi?
since I was born, or even before that, Egypt was always talking about investing in Africa.
Yes.
We had a nationalistic socialist approach under President Nasser's time, where we expanded, but not looking from a cost-benefit or economical point, but more politically, so it was not sustainable. But now we have an expansion, a benefit from the COMESA. Trade with African countries has grown dramatically.
Yes.
We have Egypt's largest and most successful private sector bank setting up a real bank, not a rep office and not a mediocre unit in Kenya. So we have activities. And with this Egyptian commercial chain and the plans to have locations in 6 countries, this will activate realistically. Because what we're doing now is we're exporting medicine to Africa, we're exporting cables, chemical products, mechanical products, and so on. And we're importing some of their products. But we have to live and be present there. So we should take the same approach like we do with Europe and the US of having clear relations, agreements which are numerical, which are achievable, which can be traced, so that we grow this systematically, because obviously our future is bound together. If we do well, Africa will do well. If Africa does well, we hopefully will do well too. So it needs to move into a business approach rather than a government or state approach. And this is the point which the president has always been addressing, has been pushing for Egypt doing infrastructure projects in Africa. Now he is also, when hosting the Youth Forum, he created a competition for app developers for Africa. So he's always Africa in his mind, and nothing brings people more together than business. When we look at the European Union, these are countries which were together 5 or 10 years before that in World War II. They are bombing and killing each other.
Yes.
But the mutual benefit and the business benefits brought them together and enforced those ties. And this is the approach we should take on Africa, and I think it's the right approach, and hopefully that African countries will follow suit. I mean, you know, in a partnership, it's never one side. No, not one side can make it fail or succeed. It has to be the joint will and capabilities of both parties. Lots of African countries have struggles, be that economic or political or demographic or environmental. But if we sincerely extend our help and support, I think we can overcome this, or we can work one by one, bits and pieces together to help for a better future for our people.
Yeah, speaking of the environment, the climate change conference summit, the COP27, will be held here in Egypt, representing Africa for the first time in Sharm el-Sheikh in the month of November. How can this be beneficial for Africa, not just for Egypt? Because we know that Africa is affected by climate change. Yes. Maybe the most out of all the continents that we have in the world is being affected by the carbon dioxide emissions. On the other hand, the wealthier nations, the West, is producing those emissions. How do you see the importance of hosting such a summit in Egypt for the Africans?
First, it is very important for Africa that Africa is seen as part of the problem and the solution. Because, as you mentioned, the industrial world has been producing carbon dioxide, polluting our air and the world. We are affected without the benefits of industrialization. Yes. When we move to clean energy, and be that wind, be that water, be that green hydrogen, all those natural resources are present in Africa, and Africa could be the energy plantation for the West, solving its own problem, because Africa has an energy gap, and also to the rest of the world. I mean, we always hope in any crisis like the Ukraine and Russia that people will get wiser and learn it's not the time to fight, it's to cooperate. We're all human beings. We want to all survive. We need to take care of our planet. Don't pollute the water, don't pollute the air. But greed makes people forget that. But having that conference in Egypt representing Africa is extremely important, because before that, Africa wasn't on the map.
And it could be turning us
It's always a passive recipient.
Yes, it could be turning us from greed to green economy, as you mentioned, Mr. Osama Murad, the financial and the investment expert. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Mr.
And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.